Hi everybody, welcome back. Today is going to be a requested video by one of my viewers, and that is, as you can tell by the title, my experience as a flight attendant. If you didn't know, I was a flight attendant. I was a flight attendant for 5 years, and it was honestly one of the best jobs and best experiences of my life. I'd wanted to be a flight attendant since I was 18. I had a neighbor who was a flight attendant. She was always tan, and she was always telling me about how she was always in Brazil and Rio and all these other places, and she was always at the beach, and she loved her job. So when I turned 21, I started applying. I was interviewed by 2 different companies, and I was really excited about it, and then 9/11 happened, and then I was like, no way, I'm not doing this. Fast forward 5 years later, I decided I wanted to be a flight attendant again. However, I was in my first marriage. That marriage was a very loveless marriage, and let's just leave it at that. It was going nowhere fast. And I got interviewed by, again, 2 different companies, and I was invited to go to training by both of these companies. Now, training for these other companies was 7 or 8 weeks. One of them was 7 weeks, another one was 8 weeks. And you don't come home because you're busy, and you won't be able to come home at all. People would have to come to you if they wanted to visit. And I knew my husband at the time wasn't going to come visit, and I knew that if I left for 7 or 8 weeks, my marriage would be completely done. So I felt that I owed it to myself and to the marriage to stay, and at the very least try to work on the marriage. So I turned those down. And then 2 years later, I got divorced. And then it was 2011, and I was just getting out of another relationship that was the worst heartbreak of my entire life. I think I've talked about that part of it in another video. But it was the worst breakup of my entire life. My heart was completely broken, and I needed something to kind of revive me and shake me up a little bit. I was in the medical industry, and I decided I wanted to try to be a flight attendant again. So as this person was leaving my life, this company entered my life, and I interviewed a second time, and then I was invited to training, and I said absolutely. I always say that I don't know where I would be or where I would have been if it wasn't for this company, and they basically saved my life. That sounds very dramatic, but really, I was in shambles, and they kind of picked me up and hugged me. So I started training, and this company at the time only had training for 3 weeks. At that time, they only had 2 aircrafts. So it wasn't a very big company, but training was 3 weeks, and it was every day. I seem to remember maybe having 2 or 3 days off in those 3 weeks. And in those 3 weeks, I was also moving out of the apartment that I had with the boyfriend. It was a mess. Every day for training, you would have an exam, and you would have to get an 80% or higher to pass the exam. If you got a 79, you failed the exam, and you had 1 chance to retake it, and in that retake, you had to get 100%. If you got a 99%, you were out of the program. So it was very intense, and it's a lot of safety information, and it's a lot of save passengers' lives information, and you have to take it very seriously, otherwise you're not going to make it. I immersed myself in training, and also Adele's 21 album, which if I still to this day hear a song from that album, I'm transported back in time. So training was amazing, and it was fun for me, and I met some amazing people that I'm still friends with today, and who I actually lived with in Boston, where we were all based. Before I lived with them, I was kind of a gypsy and staying at hotels and living at the airport and just kind of homeless for a little bit, until my friend Matt took me in, and I shared a room with him. We had 2 air mattresses in the room. It was really fun. So when you first get out of training, you are on what they call reserve, and that's basically just on call. So you're on call for 12 hours in a day, and other airlines do things differently, but this airline, you were on call for 12 hours, so usually 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. So they could call you at 3 a.m. and then you have 2 hours to get to the airport to do whatever trip or flight or whatever they want you to do. So sometimes that was difficult when you got that call at 3 in the morning and you just went to bed at 1 o'clock, but you know. And then eventually I transferred down to Orlando, which is where I was living, and I wasn't commuting anymore, and I was living in base, and then I got a line, which means you weren't on reserve anymore, you actually had a schedule. So that was perfect. 3 years into it, I met and married my husband, and then 4 years into it, I got pregnant. And then 5 years into it, my husband and I decided that flying was no longer the best option for me, and that I was going to be a stay-at-home mom. So that is why I left the airlines, not because I hated it, because I really didn't. I loved it and I loved the company, and I encourage anybody who wants to be a flight attendant to try for it. The airlines are very competitive, and once you get in, it's all about seniority, so you just really got to stick it out. I saw places that I'd never seen before. You get amazing benefits to fly on the airline that you're working for, and the airline that you're working for also is kind of affiliated with other airlines, so you get benefits on other airlines too. We've traveled kind of just everywhere because of the benefits, so that alone is kind of worth it. Other than passengers getting crazy and rude and touchy-feely and inappropriate, it was fine. So that's kind of a quick thing about how I loved being a flight attendant. If you have any other questions about flight attending or airlines or travel, leave them in the comments below and I will be happy to answer them. And thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next one. Bye.